I'm the product sales manager covering the networking portfolio of VMware and Redington. So today we want to briefly look at what the VMware networking portfolio looks like, as well as how SD-WAN is part of it and what SD-WAN does. And today's session is about enablement. So we are basically going to be discussing how to sell SD-WAN throughout this session. At any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to post it in the Q&A window, and we'll answer them either at the end or as in between. We'll take a short break to answer the questions. Okay, so a lot of people know, a lot of our customers know VMware as a compute storage company. Some customers know the network as well, the network visualization via NSX. But recently VMware has made a lot of acquisitions in the networking and security space. And I just wanted to give you a brief overview of how and why this makes sense, right? So the first thing is that, applications are very different. And application at the end of the day is what IT is all about. It's all about applications. At the end of the day, it's about how businesses are serving their customers, and the application has come to the fore of all that. And because of that, applications have changed. It used to be a basic client server model in the past, which we call monolithic. From that, we went to a tiered setup. So we started segregating parts of that application depending on the kind of function that it does. We started separating them into components. Now it has gotten even more sophisticated by becoming service oriented, which means that we have microservices, which are tiny pieces of code that performs a specific function, and with containers becoming a huge part of application delivery today. That is the way that we see the world is moving forward. While this has happened, unfortunately, the network has not really kept up with that pace. While the network has evolved, so just like compute and storage, we have also seen the network get virtualized, get orchestrated as well, but not to the extent that we are able to keep up with that pace. We are able to deliver the same kind of support for applications and enterprises, right? A lot of networks today in enterprises and a lot of organizations, like government, for example, they are still quite tiered. It is very complex, and you will end up seeing a lot of different vendors in the same organization. It becomes complex and heterogeneous. The problem with this kind of appliance-based, architectures are the fact that they are very inflexible. It's very hard to change something. It's not impossible. It's just really hard. It is extremely hard to change something in such traditional architectures. And networking and security teams have increasingly overlapping functions when it comes to this. The best example for this is the WAN, because traditionally, which is from 2000 to say 2015, predominantly everybody looked at a model of hub and spoke. And we have a DC, and the WAN is predominantly being delivered from firewalls, perimeter firewalls, and which has kind of started to transform into edge devices today. But the problem is that the complexities of WAN is very hard to realize in a firewall device, because the firewall device is built for something else and really doesn't suit the purposes of the WAN. And this brings us to the challenge of the network and security teams having challenges to evolve in their own disciplines. They are limited by design when it comes to innovation. And that's the reason why VMware has taken a software-defined approach towards network. It started with NSX. It has continued with the evolution of NSX, the NSXT, that came out just now is a huge improvement on what VMware has done in the past with NSX. It gives a lot more flexibility now. And on top of that, VMware has made a couple of acquisitions like RV Networks, which is a load balancing, advanced load balancing solution, which is also, software defined, and it's a pure software as well. So with the acquisition of VeloCloud, we are bringing these workloads closer together as well. So with all of this, VMware's focus is from everywhere except the physical layer. We want to commoditize the physical layer, whether it be switches, WAN links, the underlying hardware to run load balancers. We see this as an opportunity to um, to orchestrate everything from layer 2 to layer 7 in networking and security. And all the solutions that we have today, starting from NSX in the LAN, DC, and also cloud networking, and ALB, load balancing, as well as WAN, everything is software defined. And the software defined approach that brings us all these solutions closer to the workloads, closer to the application where they run, whether it be SaaS, whether it be cloud, or whether it's private cloud, it doesn't really matter. We bring these solutions closest to where the apps actually are. And of course, automation is extremely important today. Automation really brings a lot of benefits. So about 5 years ago, automation was the buzzword in large enterprises, where by automating, you could make your teams better, make your teams more agile. But that has really changed. Now, a lot of companies are, they start their IT journey in the cloud, as we call it, born in the cloud startups. When we get to the cloud, there is no way around automation. We have to automate. We really cannot have a cloud setup without automation, because we need the machines to talk to each other. We need to use the APIs at our disposal to make sure that our policies and our configurations, they're all consistent across the organization. Otherwise, it will end up breaking the applications that we are trying to deliver. So to bring this a full circle, this is what we have in the networking portfolio. This is the portfolio that fuels the vision of VMware in the networking and security space. There are a couple of elements that I haven't mentioned here, because today we are going to be focusing on the VMware SD-WAN by VeloCloud. So I want to specifically focus on this topic for the next 20-30 minutes, so that we have an overview of how to sell SD-WAN to our customers. So in a nutshell, or to put it in one word, VeloCloud, VMware SD-WAN, VeloCloud, is a cloud-delivered SD-WAN. And I want to make sure that what we mean by software-defined. If not anything else, the primary objective of any software-defined system is to have a clear and delineated and distinct control and data plane. The control plane, or the management plane, as some people call it. So that component could be a controller, could be an orchestrator, needs to make the decisions, whereas the data plane should actually do the work. It's a concept that has evolved a lot in the last few years, and unfortunately, because of marketing, it gets muddied a little bit. But at the essence, this is what it is, and we want to mention that the cloud part of it here is the fact that the orchestrator, in this case the control plane, is based on the cloud, whereas the edge devices are based on customer premises, and in the cloud where customers have their assets, which means that none of that traffic ever reaches the orchestrator. So that's the reason why we call it a cloud delivered SD-WAN. So this is the quick agenda. I know it looks like a lot, but mostly they're all 1 or 2 slides each max. So, we'll get to the end of this fairly quickly. At the end of this, we will have a quiz, which means that there are some giveaways at the end of this. In terms of background for VeloCloud, it was acquired by VMware in 2017. There are about 2,000 plus customers which is served directly by VeloCloud, and through telco partners. There are more. Especially the smaller enterprises are served by service providers across the world. In the region, though, we do not have that model yet, which means that this is being sold through the traditional distributor reseller model. There are about 80,000 plus sites. The largest enterprises, they're both on VeloCloud. In terms of footprints, it's operating more than 70 plus countries, and we are adding more and more countries to the list. In terms of the ecosystem, majority of the security vendors are already alliance partners with VeloCloud, and on the right you can see some of the biggest names when it comes to BFSI, retail, manufacturing. They're all customers of VeloCloud. This is the market share that we had in 2017. Obviously, this has gone up since. So the point of this slide is that to make sure that VeloCloud is not a new technology. Although it's been about 6 years since VeloCloud entered the market, it's not a new untested technology. In fact, VeloCloud even today maintains the highest market share across the world, and it leads the second place Viptela by at least twice the number of deployments and revenue. And this is another slide to kind of drive home that point. And so in 2018, Cisco was placed in the leaders quadrant through the acquisition of Viptela. And as you can see in 2019, now VMware is kind of pulling away from all the other vendors, primarily because of the fact that since the acquisition in 2017, the SD-WAN has gone through, has gotten more and more features, and it keeps improving. So every 3 months, VMware keeps adding features to the VeloCloud, and since it is a subscription-based model, that those features are available to the customers as soon as we launch it. Another point that I want to note is that, as you can see, outside the leaders quadrant, there is a bit of a crowd of other vendors who claim to have SD-WAN solutions. But at the same time, you can see while Fortinet keeps rising in ability to execute, you do not see them progressing on completeness of vision. And here is where I want to make a very distinct point. The reason being all these players are not placed in the leaders quadrant is because they do not have critical features like bringing SaaS applications on the overlay is not available with any of these vendors. So the only vendor right now to provide those services are Silver Peak and VMware. And Cisco has fallen back primarily because some of the claims that Cisco had in terms of how vast the deployment will be has not been true. For example, Cisco's claim that Viptela will work on existing ISR wasn't true. In fact, you need to rip and replace the existing ISRs for it to be able to provide the Viptela WAN. Also, Cisco has confusing offerings because of Meraki and their traditional WAN offerings, apart from Viptela as well. So once again, to highlight the reason that VMware is placed so apart from the other vendors is because of the uh, rich features that are offered, and also because it supports so many mission critical environments for a large amount of customers compared to all the other vendors, and we are able to showcase the benefits and the value to our customers. So I come from a networking background. So I was a solution architect working with all the traditional networking vendors like Cisco and Juniper, Arista Networks, Extreme Networks. So in those scenarios, one of the things that we continuously do is that we always treat the data center, the branch, and the cloud very separately, right? And unfortunately, this is no longer viable, primarily because of the fact that today we have, apart from the data center, we also have applications running on the cloud, and which means that if there is more than 10 branches, we need to not only connect those branches to the DC, we also need to connect them to the cloud, which becomes prohibitively expensive after some point. And the second point is that if you have SaaS offerings like Workday or Teams or Zoom, for example, they're all delivered not from platforms and infrastructure that we control, unlike traditional AWS or native AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud deployments. So when it comes to SaaS, we do not control where it is being delivered from, which means that in order to bring that particular application or workload into the WAN overlay, what VeloCloud can do is that it can place gateways, which VeloCloud maintains, close to these SaaS data centers, which means that if you have a Zoom subscription, when you deploy VeloCloud solution in your enterprise, the VeloCloud orchestrator will make use of a cloud gateway that is maintained by VeloCloud, which is deployed very close to the Zoom data center, wherever that is. And from what we understand today, should be an Oracle data center, wherever that is in the world. One of the things that we see is that the cloud traffic is increasing, and it is increasing in an exponential fashion, right? And another major factor that we need to consider is that a lot of communication has moved away from transactional methods like emails and IMs to teleconferencing, especially in today's world with the pandemic. There is a lot of collaboration happening that is remotely, and all of this traffic is going via the internet to different places as well. Now, the problem with the internet inherently is the fact that it is very unreliable, and it has been. While it improves in some ways, that's not uniform. It doesn't happen across the internet. It happens to particular places or particular types of offerings from ISPs. I don't know if you guys are fans of Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan. Good series. I saw it, but the truth is that the internet is very slow when we consider the fact that we need to have interactive voice and video to be going through it. In the old days, in the early days of LAN and WAN, we used to meticulously design quality of service across the LAN to make sure that the voice and video traffic, interactive voice and video, and other mission critical traffic are given the priority that it requires. Now, the problem with the internet is the fact that we cannot do that. We do not control this, control these equipment that sits in between. We cannot configure a router which is maintained by the ISP, right? So we need to overcome this somehow. We need to make sure that we are able to build an overlay on top of this infrastructure that we do not control, and that's where the SD-WAN comes in, and that's the magic of SD-WAN. And another thing to point out is that in the earlier designs, we always will have some sort of expensive private line like MPLS or leased lines as the primary links, and we'll have the cheaper broadbands have backup links, and whenever the primary link fails, for example, when the MPLS fails, we'll fail over to a backup link via typically using an IPsec tunnel. But the point is that it's no longer effective to do that, because simply installing two circuits, that is really not going to solve the problem, because these two links operate at different capacity, which means that the performance is going to be highly unpredictable in these situations. And that is where the SD-WAN, VeloCloud SD-WAN comes in. The VeloCloud's primary objective is to let customers bring their own bandwidth, and we are saying it doesn't matter if it's an expensive lease line, that's okay. If it is a broadband, that's okay. If it is 3G, 4G, and tomorrow 5G, that's okay too. All we see is internet bandwidth, and that's it. And we no longer want to talk about failover, because that's an old term. We want to talk about aggregating all of this bandwidth. For example, I have one lease line, I have two broadband links, and I have a 4G connection. In the new term, in the SD-WAN world, we should not be talking about failing over from one link to the other. We should be talking about aggregating all of it. So I have, say, 50 Mbps through lease line, highly reliable. Then I have two, say, 200 Mbps broadband links, and maybe another 10 Mbps through the 4G. And we should be able to combine all this together and say that, hey, I have around 500 plus Mbps of bandwidth available at this particular site, and that's what we are going to use. Another thing we need to do is that, like we mentioned, lease line is highly reliable. The broadband not so much. The 3G or 4G maybe even less, and it's low bandwidth as well, used in case of emergencies. And within these, we need to know which line is degrading, which one is the best. And another point is that if there is a chance of packets getting lost across one of these lines, we need to be able to remediate in real time with no human intervention. We should be able to do that automatically, because these need to happen in sub-second fashion, right? Another thing we need to do is we need to be aware of the application generating each traffic. We cannot depend on port numbers. We cannot depend on these complex CLI configurations that we need to do to achieve this. We need to be able to look at traffic, do deep packet inspection, look at the payload, and understand which application generated that traffic, which VeloCloud SD-WAN will do. And once we understand the application, we need to understand what is the policy associated with it. If it is, for example, voice and video, if it is a UC, then it should have a matching business policy. And in VeloCloud's case, it automatically understands all this. For example, it will understand that Teams traffic is extremely sensitive and very business critical. So it will automatically assign the required priority according to the policy and send that packet along the way. And another thing we need to do is that we cannot have management systems sitting in customer premises. Instead, we'll have an orchestrator that is based on cloud and enable what we call a zero-touch provisioning, which means that to be honest, in VeloCloud terms, in the VeloCloud solution, the individual edge devices that we speak of, they do not have any way to be accessed other than through the orchestrator, which means that as soon as we plug these devices in, it is automatically going to call home, and based on the serial number and other identifying information from the edge devices, it will automatically pull down whatever configuration it needs and start working. And it's completely GUI based. There is zero CLI involvement here. And at the end, it needs to be able to monitor and report as well. And we are able to see unprecedented level of detail when it comes to reporting on the WAN, which we have never seen before. So what makes this magic possible? How are we able to build an overlay over the internet, over something we have no control over, is by performing what we call aggregation. Okay, link aggregation basically means that when we have two connections, let's say for example we have two connections and both of them are deteriorating at different points. What we are able to do is to understand, for example, in this case, if you see the kind of screenshot on the right side, you can see latency is okay, it's fair. It's not perfect, but it's okay. Jitter is okay, but we are seeing some packet loss, which is not acceptable for this kind of traffic. So that is achieved by monitoring these links continuously. It happens in real time, and over a period of time, we'll also be able to know, or we'll also be able to perform something that we call a predictive analysis of what is going to happen with a particular link and adjust accordingly. Another thing, excuse me. Another thing we are able to do is dynamic per packet steering, which means that unlike the firewall-based SD-WAN solutions, we are able to send packets at the packet level, not per flow, not per session, no such complicated calculations required. If when the packet arrives ready to be sent, it is going to be placed on the link which is suited for it the most. And it also does on-demand remediation. For example, we send out some packets, we already know that that line is deteriorating, so the edge device is able to make some calculations and take some actions in real time to make sure the packets are not getting lost. For example, it could be that it could replicate the packets and send 2 instead of 1 to the destination, and at the destination, when the first packet arrives, it is received and the rest of the duplicate packets are discarded, thereby increasing the chance of the packets getting through and decreasing the chance of packet loss. In terms of components, what VeloCloud has is extremely simple. It only has 3 components. It has a cloud-based orchestrator. It is a full lifecycle management system. We could do everything that we need to do in terms of provisioning. We can manage, we can build all the policies, define all the policies, activate sites. Everything is done from the orchestrator. We have the edges, which basically is the device that does the actual work based on the policies that we have configured. The edge devices will communicate with the orchestrator and get all the necessary information, including configurations, as well as policies, and it will configure, and based on that configuration, it will process the traffic. And we have hubs. So if we want to apply this to an existing traditional enterprise, we can use hubs. For example, banks, BFSI organizations usually shy away from cloud, public cloud, and in those scenarios, we can use the hubs. On top of that, we have the gateways. Now, the gateways are not licensed; it's not sold to the customers. So what we do is that we have a specific set or a tier of license. So when we need to activate the gateways, we will just quote that particular license for the required bandwidth. And when we do that, these gateways are provisioned and maintained completely by VeloCloud or one of the VeloCloud partners. And this is transparent. The deployment of the gateway is transparent to the user, which means that as far as the customer is concerned, they only need to maintain the edge devices via the orchestrator. And depending on their network setup, VeloCloud will automatically provision the gateways that they maintain across all ISP points of presence, as well as in all SaaS data centers. So we have seen predominantly 5 types of customers who see value in SD-WAN. So these are the sort of low-hanging fruits. So we have cloud adopters and traditional enterprises adopting cloud. In fact, we have a customer in Saudi who has been working with us to kind of actually they first adopted the cloud, so they moved some of their services, some of their applications to the cloud, and they have more than 80 locations, and they found that it became a hindrance, or their performance dropped because of the fact that the traditional architecture is not as suited for cloud as much as they had imagined. So after their adoption, we did POCs and we demonstrated how the performance improvement happened. So now we are working with them on a phased manner to get more and more stores or more and more locations to on the SD-WAN overlay and bring that connectivity to the DC and the cloud locations as well. New applications, whenever we have some applications that need to be delivered real time. Content, for example, retail is one of the most important adopters, in this particular use case. Every time customers want to upgrade their CPE, when a bunch of edge locations, when the firewall needs to be refreshed, when the ISRs need to be refreshed, this is another scenario where we do talk about VeloCloud. Sometimes, like it happened with one of the hospitals here, we started talking about cutting down WAN costs, and then we started discussing this, and during the POC it went quite well. It's only 6 sites, but they have a large amount of traffic flowing between these 6 sites, while they don't fit the rest of the scenarios that I've mentioned, but it ended up being very beneficial for the customer because they ended up saving close to $100,000 a year in terms of WAN costs. And in terms of retail, and in the region, for example, we have Maf Carrefour, who is a VeloCloud customer. In fact, they have deployed this across the region as well, in the Middle East. So all of Maf Carrefour, the retail, the whole retail chain is on VeloCloud. And the reason for that is, back then, retail stores looked something like this, but that has changed now. As you may already know, everything is linked with each other, and there's a lot of automation that has happened in the retail world. And the way retail stores are now reaching their consumers have changed drastically in the last few years. And this is something that SD-WAN can definitely help with. And in some parts of the world right now, in financials and healthcare, these 2 industries, they have changed the way they are, talking to their customers as well. Now, finance and healthcare are 2 industries which requires the human touch, and that is a reason why we have a lot of people who work in these two areas, because you need a human touch to do that business. That's why we have consultants, we have advisors, we have medical professionals who predominantly only do consulting. So in order to make sure these organizations are still able to have the reach with their customers, SD-WAN can really help. Now, one thing that I want to mention here is that unlike the rest of the vendors out there, VMware does not believe in locking down customers with no choice. In fact, VMware's approach is that the best products, so the whole ecosystem eventually becomes VMware. And in order to continue that support, VMware, especially in the SD-WAN space, has maintained a really large ecosystem of security vendors. Zscaler, Palo Alto, Checkpoint. In fact, the partnership with Checkpoint is now getting better and better. We can integrate with Checkpoint, whether it's being delivered from the cloud, for example, like CloudGuard Edge, which is licensed per user. We can easily integrate that with SD-WAN. We can also have the Checkpoint VNFs running on VeloCloud Edge hardware as well, and we can service chain the WAN and the next generation firewall together. So the three key takeaways, the VeloCloud differentiators for today are: it really simplifies the entire WAN. So especially if you're talking to and the ideal customer for SD-WAN is a customer with a lot of locations. Typical example is MAF Carrefour. They are a multinational organization with a large number of branches, and SD-WAN has brought an enormous amount of simplicity and visibility when it comes to their WAN operations. The second part is the DMPO, the secret ingredient that really brings this magic with three key components as part of it. And finally, it enables customers to have the choice to migrate to the cloud at any point after they implement the SD-WAN. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks, Janaka, for organizing this. Please reach out to me if you have any questions.
Sure.
All right, go.
Thank you.